resistencia y de superación cuando ha pasado el bache. En definitiva, controlar el riesgo es fundamental y veremos si las nuevas tecnologías ayudan a todo ello. Sin ir más lejos, ahora mismo estamos sumergidos en una crisis de los microchips que llevar a cabo las condiciones pactadas que se cerraron antes de la crisis quizás a veces no es bueno o no ayuda a las empresas de este sector. Por todo ello, hablaremos en un formato, como decíamos, de entrevista totalmente en streaming con Susana Val, que será la moderadora, es directora del Centro Logístico de Zaragoza, profesora del MIT Zaragoza International Logistics Program e investigadora principal del Transport Research Group. No sé si la tenemos conectada por aquí, si no, ahora hablaré con ella y aunque sea le daré las buenas tardes desde Barcelona. Y también tenemos al entrevistado, que en este caso es el doctor Yossi Sheffi, profesor de la MIT. ¿Tenemos ya a Susana? Sí, buenas tardes. ¿Es Susana?
Buenas tardes.
Desde Zaragoza.
Encantada de estar aquí.
Gracias también por atendernos al doctor Yossi. Bueno, Susana, yo os dejo que habléis en este formato digital que nos permite hoy en día pues, podernos conectar. Y recuerda que 145 países ahora mismo os están viendo en directo, que no es poco. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your kind introduction. Thank you to the BNU organizers for this wonderful event. And it's my pleasure to introduce one of the most important persons in the field of logistics and supply chain, Professor Yossi Sheffi. Welcome to the BNU and welcome to the session Brazilian Resilience in Supply Chain. So let me summarize some of your achievements. I could be talking during hours, but let me just give a brief introduction of your background. Dr. Yossi Sheffi is Elisa Gray, Professor of Engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he serves as Director of the Center for Transportation and Logistics and Professor of Supply Chain Management at the MIT Zaragoza program at the Zaragoza Logistics Center. He's a faculty member of the MIT Civil and Environmental Engineering Department, as well as the Institute for Data Systems and Society. He's an expert in systems optimization, risk analysis, and supply chain management. He's the author of several best-selling and award-winning books, including The New Abnormal in 2020, Balancing Green, 2018, The Power of Resilience, 2015, Logistics Clusters, 2012, The Resilient Enterprise, 2005, and Urban Transportation Network in 1985. Yossi has consulted with leading enterprises and founded or co-founded 5 successful companies: Logicorp, Princeton Transportation Consulting Group, eChemicals, Logistics.com, and Syncra Systems. I'm pretty sure with his experience, Professor Sheffi is going to reveal some insights to logistics in this very uncertain context in which we are currently, and where the right management of the supply chain has acquired a crucial importance for the final consumers. So it's my pleasure again to have you here, Yossi. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Appreciate being invited.
So, Professor Yossi, or Yossi, because Yossi is fine. Okay. I would like to start by going back to your books, The Resilient Enterprise in 2005 and The Power of Resilience in 2015, where you put the concept of using supply chain resilience to gain competitive advantage on the map. Can you tell me how has supply chain resilience evolved over the last 15 years or so? And if possible, I would like you to illustrate with some examples.
Well, I started working in this actually after 9/11 in the United States. I was in the UK at the time on sabbatical in London, actually in Cambridge, and I was invited to a meeting with some people in the British Home Office, which has all the security agency reporting to. And they ask what will happen if the next Al Qaeda attack is not going to be on some symbolic target like the World Trade Center, but something that is very like economic target, like a refinery or port. And they said, well, the private sector owns all of this, so nobody knew. So this was the start of my journey on resilience, because I started interviewing company, understand what they're doing, what they're not doing. This was the result of the first book, 2005, The Resilient Enterprise. And a few years later, many of the companies that I talked to came to me and said, look, the threat has changed significantly. The risks are greater, but we are also a lot better. So finding out how better they are, I went again on a multiple, 4 years journey of interviewing companies and collecting data. This led to the power of resilience, which the subtitle is How the Best Companies Manage the Unexpected. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. And the pandemic, one of the clear impact of the pandemic was on the supply chain profession, because just let me tell you that until January 2020, people used to ask my wife, what's your husband doing at MIT? And she said he's doing research on supply chain management. People said, what is this? What is he doing? Well, 2 weeks ago, my wife went to the local supermarket and didn't find what she wanted, some cereal. And the 16-year-old kid who works in the counter said, I'm sorry, we have supply chain management problems. So this goes to tell you how far supply chain management went. So the biggest change, I say, over the last 15 years, we had larger and larger disruptions. My first book came before Katrina, the big hurricane in the United States that devastated New Orleans. The 2015 book came around the time of the Japanese, disaster. So, but my latest book, The New Abnormal, came, during the pandemic. And I think if I look all around, and we are still living in the middle of it, so it's hard to predict. But I think as far as supply chain management, and the profession, the pandemic will be a huge change, because it not only goes, it's now elevated to the boardroom. People at the boardroom ask, what's the chief supply chain manager officer doing? How do we do procurement? What's going on with material? How do we do distribution? Suddenly the board, but it came even from the board table to the dinner table. People are talking about it. People are feeling it. So it became an everyday discussion. And we see it clearly, by the way, in a huge number of applications to the supply chain management program, and the huge number of positions open. So this is some of the change. We can talk about a lot more, but let me stop here.
Sure. I think you were one of the first in introducing the term of resilience into the logistics terminology. And my next question was related to the new abnormal that you already mentioned. So you describe in this book that the resilience of supply chains is being severely tested by the COVID-19 pandemic. So how do you think supply chains have performed over the last 18 months? So you say something, but can you go in depth on how those supply chains have performed? And do you the measures that companies have taken to make their supply chains more resilient have worked during this time?
Okay. So the answer is yes, no, and maybe, depending on the question. First of all, I think that by and large, during the 2020 and the first few months of 2021, maybe the first quarter, supply chain actually worked fine. I mean, by and large, they were much better than people expected. To get an idea, think about the food supply chain. From one day to the next, in March 2020, all restaurants got closed, all universities got closed, industry closed. So all the food that was going to universities, to industrial company, to restaurants, suddenly was gone. It's about 50% of the food in the United States, at least, that goes this. The other 50% go to supermarket. And you could not send everything there. You cannot just change it to the supermarket for several reasons. First of all, it required totally different packaging. It requires, how many calories and how, the machine are not set for this. Second, people didn't only change where they bought. Instead of restaurant, they bought at the, e-commerce or went to the supermarket. They also changed what they bought. So people bought a lot more canned food, a lot more comfort food, a lot less fresh food. So with all these changes, we didn't have people go hungry. Yes, sometimes you didn't have the cutoff. And by the way, on top of it, there were several plants, meat plants and other and food plants that were closed because people got sick for a time, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks. With all this disruption, nobody went hungry. I mean, it's yes, sometimes you didn't have United States. There was a flavor of granola that was not available. Give me a break. So what? I mean, we're talking about a worldwide, emergency. So by and large, with one big exception, but by and large, during the pandemic, the first year, supply chain worked fine. What we see now, we can talk about the shortages that we see now because that's a different cause and different reason. But during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, supply chain actually worked much better than expected. What did not work well? One thing did not work well. This was the personal protective equipment, like masks and gowns. And this did not work well. This did not work well. In fact, countries, and this is not so much companies, this is countries. Give you an idea of the United States. I'm well aware, of course, of the statistics in the United States. The United States did have a huge inventory, develop huge inventory of PPEs and other supplies, other medical supplies during the Clinton administration. President Clinton read a book about pandemic and what they can do and started building up, having more ventilators, having more masks, creating a strategic supply for the United States. President Bush, who of course had 9/11, built it even further, increased the inventory. During President Obama, the inventory went down significantly. He did not replenish the inventory, and neither did President Trump. So we got to the pandemic with almost no inventory. And this was a disaster, of course. I mean, the people had to work in hospital without the proper protection, and many of them got sick and died. It's really a sad story of neglect, of not paying attention to what's important. But that's not, by and large, that's not a corporate responsibility. It is a government responsibility. And just to finish this example, in the book, I write about how to fix it. And how to fix it, you can take from three ways. First of all, we need to rebuild the national inventory for 3-4 months. You don't need to build it forever. You need to build it until industry can adjust and start making stuff. So you need to build, and this there's a model for this. It's the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The United States did a huge reserve of oil during the oil embargoes. And now the United States is a exporter of oil, but until very late, it was it needed oil. So, and we're always afraid of another embargo. So we just like this, we need a strategic, medical inventory. Another thing, again, taking an example from the banks, the banks after the financial crisis started having, there's a legislation in the U.S. that started having stress tests. And they need certain reserves of money. So they're going to be run on the bank and they're going to fail. Similarly, we need stress tests for hospitals. Hospitals, they don't need 2-3-4 months. They need at least a month until we can get the logistics of the central inventory to flow to the hospital. But in a month or 6 weeks, doesn't matter. We can do the study. We need how much. But hospitals need to keep it and they need to be audited for this. Just like banks are audited for financial reserve, hospitals need to be audited for money, for PPE reserve and other medical supply. The last thing is that we also had a shortage of medical workers at some. And again, the US had what they call the Army National Reserve. It's people who are civilians, but once a month they go for a weekend, and this will be medical reserve. So they go for a weekend to a hospital and do some do some work. And once a year, for 2 or 3 weeks, they get trained on new ways of doing business, rather than shoot and and run in the hills, whatever the military does, they can work, they can get to hospital and train on, for example, how to operate a ventilator. One has to realize that this is not brain surgery. Operating a ventilator, a modern ventilator, is very easy. It's all digital. It's all gives you the signal. So just have a 1 day of training, and people can operate ventilator and release the more educated people, the more professional to do the more complex thing. Anyway, we can talk more about it, but by and large, because of the pandemic was so widespread, and because the supply problem was so widespread, and what's going on now, it's another set of all the shortages. There's a lot more attention that companies and the governments are giving to supply chain, and I think good things will come out of it in the future.
Exactly, fully agree. So before jumping to the next question, I just want to encourage the audience just to write the questions on the chat, so that at the end of the interview, maybe we can give some answers or provide some answers to the audience. So I'm like fully agree with what you said. Maybe some contingency plans didn't work during the pandemic. Maybe that's something to be improved during this year or the coming months. What other lessons have we learned from the pandemic that may help to make future supply chains more resilient?
Okay, now we really have to distinguish between resilience to things like a pandemic, worldwide disruption, and smaller things like hurricanes or fires in a plant or something like this that is local, and the time is weeks or months. We can deal with this. We even dealt well with the significant disruption in Japan at the time. So these are things that having a little inventory can help. Inventory is not going to help for a pandemic, because after a while you just run out of inventory. One example, Toyota, for example, I'm just saying this because people, I think, are learning the wrong lessons. And the people are saying you need more inventory. You have to stop doing just in time. No. Give you an example. Toyota, the mother, the father, the parent of just in time, in the Toyota manufacturing system, after the Japan disaster, realized that semiconductors is the problem because it takes a long time to build capacity. So they start having inventory of semiconductor. And in fact, in 2021, they were almost one of the two only automotive companies that could keep production. In fact, amazingly, in the second quarter of 2021 and in the third quarter, for the first time, they sold more cars in the United States than General Motors. But guess what? At the end of third quarter, they announced 40% cut in production. They had inventory for a while, but when you have things that are so massive, you cannot have enough inventory. So they had to cut in production. So to prepare for pandemic, it's not, you should not get out of just in time. There's a lot of people don't understand that just in time is not for cutting costs. It's actually for increasing quality, the base, and a lot of other good things, or even increasing resilience. So when we look at the question is, how do we make supply chain more resilient? The number one thing that I see happening now is people are adding more technology. Technology for, first of all, automating warehouse operation and a lot of other operation. In the future, we're going to see autonomous trucking. This will take people out of the equation, so it will help you in case of a pandemic. Let me make a comment about this in a minute. There's a lot of technology that go into early warning, visibility, transparency, a lot of alert systems that give you quick alert if something happens. So, and people are, another set of technology is quick network redesign. People want to make sure that if there's a problem in one part of the world, they can move to another part, and they have all the relationship and the tracking, and they know how to go to the port, and all the customs procedures are well known. And last thing, not last, but next thing is people are getting very fast onboarding, being able to get in new suppliers on very quickly and do quality assurance and quality testing not very quickly, but faster than before, helps you when something happened to one supplier, you can move to another supplier. But all of this involves a lot of technology, a lot of process changes. But companies are investing in this, right? To a limited extent, companies are investing. It's the time to invest because right now, the the senior administration, the senior leadership of a company and the board are giving money to do it because they're under pressure. This will not last forever. So
that's fine. So technology will help to build resilience, but at the same.
let me add one thing of a warning. We're building all this automation with AI, with machine learning, with a lot of LiDARs, a lot of new technology. We are preparing for the next pandemic. However, the biggest risk that I see in the future is not pandemic, is a massive, big cyber attack. And the problem with cyber attack is that you need to prepare exactly the opposite. E-commerce is not going to work. Credit cards are not going to work. Autonomous vehicles are not going to work. So everything that we prepare for this has to be. So the problem is people are being fixated on the last problem. Military used to say you fight the last war. No, you have to imagine how bad it could be and start saying, okay, no, we don't have a pandemic. You have to go to the supermarket. You cannot have e-commerce because credit cards don't work because you cannot get on the internet. So it's just something to think about that this preparation are not for everything. They're just for another event like this.
That's how human thinks.
Exactly.
So next potential disruption will be a cyber attack. That's scary. So just technology, we've been talking about resilience, technology, potential disruptions, but you know that companies rely on supply chain professionals to ensure that supply chains are strong enough to survive to those disruptions. So what are the resilient skills that these professionals need over the next years, let's say 3 to 5 years from now on?
First of all, let me say that I see a danger in relying too much on technology. Because when we rely on one of the things that the companies who are automating processes, they have predictive modeling, they have forecasts, and the forecasts are always based on the past. They must be. If you have a fundamental change, like we had during the pandemic, that the sources change, the demand change, the type of product change, everything changed, the forecast doesn't work. So first of all, you need people. You must have people. When I did interview with company for my book, The New Abnormal, that came out last year, all the tough decisions and all the decisions that help were made by people, not by computers. Because if, for example, I was talking to, for example, CS Wholesalers, the biggest grocery wholesaler in the United States. The CEO is a student of ours, so I could get a lot of data. But he needed, at one point, right at the beginning, he needed several thousands more workers because the demand was going through the roof. So he just called friends in the industry. And he got several thousand workers who still work in supermarkets that were shut or stores that were shut. And he could get them on their payroll, but they work for him and he paid the company. Doing something like this was basically done with a phone call. I mean, so this is an example of our people and relationship. When something big happens, the computers will not catch up. I mean, so we need absolutely. So first of all, absolutely, we need people, and we need people who understand the supply chain. We need people who understand the relationship, who understand that it's not. You cannot just order something from a supplier. You need to fly out there and negotiate and have dinner with them and talk about your kids and their grandkids and because when there's a real disaster or emergency, you need the relationship to hold. You need this person to know that you mean well and you're not just, for example, over ordering stuff that you don't need, or when the supplier tells you that they really cannot do more than they can, you believe them. You don't just press them. Right now in the US, I'm aware, I'm not going to mention companies, but there are companies who over order in the automotive area. And we know there are no semiconductors, so some of the suppliers cannot give them, the automotive company, what they want. The automotive companies are suing them. That's ridiculous. The automotive company ordered 3 or 4 times what they really need. And the suppliers said, look, I cannot give it to you. Well, by contract, you have to give me what I ordered. So there's a lawsuit. That's ridiculous. This is, to me, an example of a breakdown of relationship. If you don't, there's no trust. So developing this trust is the key to good supply chain operations. So, and a lot of these things cannot be done by algorithm. And this is saying from a professor from MIT. I mean, so.
That's true. Beyond this, I think the way we understand logistics, the way we used to understood logistics 20 years ago is not the way we understand logistics right now. So there are some skills that has been included in the curricula of the new students of logistics. And there's a big debate in the European side, and I guess that's worldwide, about the gap between what the current curricula existing current curricula at the universities and the skills that the companies are demanding, because they are incorporating technology, because they have a vision in sustainability, for instance, that we haven't talked about it. What do you think? How do you think the universities can cover this gap? You as a professor of MIT.
Well, look, there have been. Let me tell you, we've been in this business of offering a degree in logistics for 25 years or so. We started being MIT very mathematical, very analytical. We taught people, optimization, simulation, and statistics. But we're talking to companies. They said, no. We expect this coming from MIT, but we also expect the soft skill. People need to know how to negotiate it. People need to know how to build team. People need to know how to build trust. You must include it. People know how to give a talk. People have to know how to talk to the board. All these soft skills. So started incorporating a lot of them. Right now, it's difficult because the curriculum is being congested. Everybody just wants more. So, and people have simply, the students are getting more, and it becomes more, in some sense, harder to go to the program because, we are teaching now, for example, we're teaching now AI, which we didn't use. We're teaching machine learning, which as people come from MIT, students are expected because they come from MIT, so people expect to know, yet they don't give up on any other skill. They want all the other skills as well. So it is what it is. We're trying to give as much as we can. I should say that while customers always complain, so companies complain. But on the other hand, we look at the hiring rate. And right now, 2 companies that complain the loudest, Amazon and Apple, are hiring the most people out of our program. So they're even stealing professionals from our program, which is actually bad. But so it is working. But I think it takes time to change curriculum, to change courses. We need to look at the future, as you said, 3 to 5 years from now, to see what will be the skills that are needed now. And for this, you have to imagine what the profession is going to be like. So keeping on top of technology and also understanding what it is that you teach. For example, we teach Python programming, which is the a requirement for really doing AI and understanding how to do writing some machine learning code. But on the other hand, we tell the students that you are a supply chain manager. You are not going to be an AI or machine learning professional. We have to teach you enough to understand what they're doing. We are not going to be an expert in this, but you have to understand what to do, how to choose the right software, and furthermore, we have to convince them to keep on top of it because the field is changing so fast. So come back to executive courses, take courses online, keep your skills up. That's the most important thing because we see people who are 10 years out and they are, they did not keep the skills and they're not doing well.
Very good.
Now it may or may not happen. But so this increased the number of graduates from we are limited to about 40 a year, and increase it to about 200 a year. Companies were still saying, "Are you kidding? This is not enough." So we started the online program, which is certificate degree, and in this we have well over 400,000 people learning taking it. And there's even a combination that both MIT and the ZLC are doing in terms of taking people who did the online and bringing them for one semester to campus. This just increasing the number and being able to see the profession with more professionals. So in terms of the scale network, what it does is actually the most important thing is what happened beyond the classroom. Because in the classroom, they can learn at MIT, they can learn at ZLC, they can learn at Luxembourg, they learn the material, okay. But what happens is beyond the classroom is people becoming part of a huge network of alumni. And if you sit in Buenos Aires and you want to know how to get stuff into Singapore port, you can simply get online, finding out one of the other graduates who's in Singapore and connect with them. So this starts creating the network, a global network of professionals who can talk to each other, who can help each other. And this may be the biggest impact of all this program, helping create global trust, actually, because
exactly.
you know people, you went to class with them, even though, and by the way, just for people who don't know, every year during January, we bring the students from all the scale center to MIT to meet each other and create and strengthen this network before they go out to the workforce. So all of these things are taking place and helping companies and individuals in creating trusting relationships.
Exactly. Thank you. And the last question before going to the audience questions, your next book will be related to COVID-19. That
Yes.
couldn't be otherwise. And it's related to COVID-19 and supply chain. And can you give us some insights before that book was launched?
Yes. So my last book, The New Abnormal, was written during the pandemic. I started in March and the book came out in October, which is fun by itself. It's like writing history while history is happening. So I had to write and rewrite as things are changing. And then we had the vaccination process. So the vaccination is actually a supply chain management problem because you have to get, the companies have to make the stuff and they have to get there were well over 100 companies that were trying to develop vaccines. And they had to get all the material, they're competing with each other, and some cooperating, some competing, and then you had to make it and you have to distribute it, and then people didn't want it, and then how you do it. And so in March this year, I started working on a new book about the vaccination process, which is similar. It was while it was happening, I was writing about it, which means you have to write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and change what you write and hope that the last version is more or less, representative. The book is called A Shot in the Arm. The subtitle is How Science, Engineering, and Supply Chains Converge to Vaccinate the World. And the book will be out again. The last two books, I used to do books with commercial publisher or MIT Press, big publishers. The last two books I did with we publish our own. With the help of colleagues here at CTL, we did self-publishing on Amazon, which, by the way, just to give you an idea, going to a publisher, you give them the manuscript, it takes about a year to get the book. Amazon does it in 48 hours. Wow. So it's as I talked to, just as an aside, as I talked to one of the CEOs of one of these publishing houses, tell me it take 10 months or 12 months. I said, talking to you is like talking to a travel agent before Expedia. You are dead, you just don't know it. If Amazon does it in 48 hours, how can you live with doing it in 10 months, in 11 months? So this book is also going to be self-published. It's going to be available on Amazon October 19th, on Amazon, on Google, on Apple, both in, on most of the e-version is available everywhere. You can have a physical version will be available on Amazon on October 19th.
Wow, just a few days.
Absolutely, the week after next, it will be available. We're just working very hard to finish the process.
Good luck. So we'll wait for this online version. Okay, so let me formulate a couple of questions from the audience before closing this interview. So the first question is, would you recommend Western countries not to depend so much on Asian semiconductor manufacturers? What do you think about Europe being so dependent on others?
Okay, it's Europe, the United States as well. Look, first of all, the problem is particularly with semiconductors, that it's becoming a national security issue. Because, for example, again, when you say Asian, it cannot depend on China. Right now, it depends on Taiwan. I mean, the Taiwan Semiconductors is still the biggest in the world. But Taiwan Semiconductor is building a plant in the United States, for example. And governments, both the European governments, the EU in particular, and the US, and Korea, and Japan, governments are investing significant billions of dollars in helping companies build plants in the country, because they realize that semiconductors, beyond having to wait for cars and the price of cars going up and the price of refrigerators and washing machine, this in the United States, there are shortages. You cannot get a washing machine. You have to wait. If you want to buy a new car, you get to the lot, the prices are sky high, and it's not a good experience. But I lost my train of thought. What are we talking about?
Don't worry. We can go to the last question. I think we are running out of time. So the last question is, which countries do you think have done better in these last pandemic months? Which have performed better than, maybe there's some countries that have performed better than others? I don't know.
Very interesting question, because the answer to this is when. Within the first year, Australia was great. No cases. New Zealand was great. Now they have huge problems because they did so well. They didn't realize that you cannot stop the virus. So they say, well, we don't need actually, vaccines. We just close the country, and all. It doesn't work. So this did. So now they have a problem. But if you ask me 6 months ago, they were great. Other countries who, it's really interesting, countries who started with good vaccination process. Of course, Israel had a good vaccination process, but Portugal is now doing very well, better than Spain. In fact, Spain is doing well, but Portugal is doing very well I think that the number one in Europe or close to it, which is really amazing. There's a lot of stories about why they were so successful. They put the military in charge and did. But at the end of the day, you see several things. First of all, mandating vaccines work. Despite all the problems, despite all the demonstration, if you look at France, if you look at, start with demonstration, all this, but the number of vaccination goes up, because of the, what they call the green passport, not allowing people who are not vaccinated to all kind of venues because there's mandate. It will be interesting in the United States because the United States became very political. The Biden administration announced that they are, every company with over 100 employees has to mandate vaccination. And companies, it's really interesting because while there's a lot of, the law did not come out yet, but it's already there are lawsuits against it. But on the other hand, you see companies doing it. United Airlines just fired 600 people who did not want to get vaccinated.
Wow.
The New York, the largest public school system in the United States is in New York. And New York just fired 7% of the teachers who didn't want to get vaccinated. So people are doing this, especially, there are other places like MIT, you must get vaccinated. Everybody has to get vaccinated. But if you don't vaccinate, then maybe you can work from home. Not everybody, but for example, professors cannot. We are required to work here. And so we better be vaccinated, otherwise there's a problem. I don't know how they're going to solve it. But so you see countries that started to have good leadership, honestly, strong leadership, are doing better than other countries.
Very good. So I think we don't have much more time for any other question as we are running out of time. I just want to thank you very much, Yossi, Professor Yossi, for your answers. It's been great. And I think today we have all learned a little bit more of logistics and of course, the future of logistics. This is a wonderful field of expertise for those that are thinking on the future endeavors. So thank you very much, Yossi. It's my pleasure.
Sure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Interesting debate. We just heard it. Thank you. Until next time, Dr. Sheffi. Y bien, Susana, desde tu posición académica, creo que ha quedado muy claro que al final, más que un Biologistics, podría decirse un B-Academy, ¿no? Porque estamos en una constante renovación de los contenidos, de qué tenemos que aprender para que esta logística se pueda llevar a cabo con la situación que nos ha quedado después de la pandemia, ¿no?
Totalmente, totalmente. Tenemos que formar a los nuevos logísticos del futuro. Desde luego hay mucho aprendizaje en el camino.
Y como siempre, Apple y Amazon yo creo que van liderando, ¿no?, todo esto. Vemos que la logística y el e-commerce, donde acaba uno y empieza el otro, es muy difícil, ¿eh?
Es una línea muy delgada, totalmente, y que hemos cada vez hecho más delgada a raíz de la pandemia y del comercio electrónico, como bien has apuntado.
Totalmente. Bueno, Susana, pues también desde tu posición de académica creo que también tienes mucho trabajo. Vamos a dejarlo aquí. Muchísimas gracias también por acompañarnos en este formato online y en streaming que hemos podido hacer. Nosotros ahora haremos una breve pausa, volveremos a la semipresencialidad porque es una característica de este BNew, este movimiento B2B, que impulsa la nueva economía con objetivos como conectar, transformar e impulsar. Y recordamos que tenemos todos nuestros sponsors que nos acompañan a lo largo de esta semana, Servihabitat, el Ministerio de Transportes, Industria y Agenda Urbana, también Akbar, a l'Ajuntament de Barcelona y a la antigua fábrica Estrella Damm de Barcelona, donde este año se incorpora la familia BNew para ofrecernos este magnífico plató donde estamos retransmitiendo en streaming durante más de 6 horas consecutivas cada día. Hasta ahora.